Hey, Vertigo listeners, welcome back to another episode. Thank you for tuning in. And let's talk a little bit about air, healing, and wellness. That's EIR, air, healing, and wellness. If you're not there getting a massage, relaxing, and rejuvenating, sitting in the sauna, or maybe even grabbing a bite at Deja Brew, then what are you doing? Let's go. 5752 U.S. Route 11, Pulaski, New York. That's air, EIR, healing, and wellness. You need to get there. Now on to the episode.
Old school. He looks like a radio. Yeah, I say that every one of my. I think I mentioned that. Like when I got the headset on, I'm in the zone.
Hey, Vertigo Nation, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. For those who are just finding me, stay tuned, listen in. I am absolutely sure that this is going to make your head spin. And for those of you who have been here for a minute and have subscribed, thank you so much for your support. I have a guest back with me today, Ashley, who we have done 2 episodes so far talking about Ashley's journey. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, specifically. And I'm really excited for this episode because we're really going to dive into now kind of the where we're at now, right? Like
the aftermath.
Yeah, and how do you pick up the pieces from that, and like what does that look like? And in our brief conversation, kind of leading up, through email to the podcast, looking over like all of this stuff the work that you've been doing in the now. It's just absolutely incredible. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about, not just the troubled teen industry, which I think is still got to be a huge topic, because you had made a comment, actually. So I'm going to go off my script a little bit, but you had made a comment that said, I think it was in the one email that you had replied back saying, hey, I've got kind of another idea. And you had talked about how insurance is funding, the troubled teen industry because that's what's paying for kids to be there, but then it's also paying for your healing journey and your counseling. Yeah. And that to me is what really just, I sat back for a minute and thought, they're making a lot of money off of me before and after. That's right.
Double dipping.
Yeah. Right. It is double dipping.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so just incredible. And so, and the voice that you're hearing on the mic is Alex. He is also with us, right?
Yep.
So yeah.
Here again.
Yeah, he is back. God did not just break in all of a sudden for other listeners, Don't want anybody going out the road wondering who's talking from the clouds. So anyway, so there we go. But we're going to kind of dial in to this CP. All right, here I go again. I was practicing saying this on the mic. For some reason, my brain doesn't break up these consonants together. But CPTSD is how I have to say it. So we're going to let Ashley kind of take the mic. But this is something that hits home for me because I am somebody who has also been diagnosed with PTSD and understand these struggles. And so I thought it was extremely important for you to be able to come on and kind of talk about that as well, because it's one of those things that I just don't think is talked about enough. I think that, matter of fact, I'll tell a quick story and then I'm going to let you take over. But I remember when I finally got comfortable really with the notion of talking about PTSD, I was talking with a buddy of mine, and I had told him, that I struggle with PTSD. I think he was one of the first people that I told, like outside of like, my, Minna or, family. And so I remember him looking at me, and the first thing that he said was, well, thank you for your service. And I had a pause, and I was like, well, I'm not a service member and haven't been a service member, so no disrespect. But, it's also that education of there are other people who are walking around and with PTSD, and it's not just necessarily military related. I don't want to take away from the military because I am so thankful for their service and do understand the struggles that they come home with. So no, I'm not trying to, I don't know, lighten that or dampen that, but
Right.
there are other reasons why people have PTSD. And
Yeah.
so from there, I'm going to kind of let you kind of take over the reins here, but welcome back and thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much for
you.
joining.
I guess, like you said, we're not taking away from their experience. We're giving a platform to ours,
Yeah,
which is
I
people
agree.
that have experienced different types of trauma. And one of the big differences between PTSD and CPTSD is the longevity.
Mm-hmm.
So CPTSD is really like a long-term exposure.
Yep.
In my case, we're looking at 19 plus years of continual trauma and neglect and abuse. So it's a little bit different in the aspect of it's not stemming from, 1, 2, or 3 events. It's reoccurring
Yep.
events, and that's one of the main differences. And
Which, if I can interject for a minute, I think is something important for people to also kind of just know that there is PTSD that you can get and also be, I don't want to say cured of, but with counseling and with things like, for example, I had a good friend of mine who got hurt in machinery at work, and that's PTSD.
Right.
But there's a healing process that comes with that. So there's different levels
Absolutely.
too. And so I think that's just to kind of clue people in, know, that this is a very deep-seated thing.
And I have been talking, I do weekly therapy. I've been in it for almost a year now. And it's as deep as literally changing the physical structure of your brain, the neuroplasticity. And I remember I had some MRIs mid 2000s and then like 2017, and they found some white lesions. And so they thought that, there might have been, some brain damage, and there were questions on if I had like any big physical impacts on my head. And it wasn't really looked at from a mental health perspective at that point. They were thinking, was this from an accident that had happened? And now that I've been in therapy, I've learned that things like that can actually grow because of the mental health abuse.
I didn't think about that either.
Yeah, and fortunately, some of it is reversible. You're able to, through therapy, learning different healing techniques, you can actually heal some of the neuroplasticity. So thankfully, I'm relatively young, I call myself, at 37. So, thankfully, I'm on this journey now, but some of it's definitely going to be there for a while, which affects anything from my intracranial pressure, my eyes, it even affects, because a lot of mine is at the front. So, I thought my eyes were going bad because I'm getting older, but it come to find out it's because of the pressure, because of those lesions in there. So I read a book, that the body keeps the score, and that's really what made me realize, that this stuff affected me more than just nightmares and keeping me up at night. Like, my body for years had been giving me signs, the hypervigilance, the, always sweaty when you're nervous. And here I'm just thinking, I'm a workaholic and I'm a busy mom. And these are side effects of that. And it was side effects of a disease that I never even heard about. I'd heard of PTSD, especially being so close to Fort Drum and knowing tons of members of the service. And I'd never learned about CPTSD until I was actually diagnosed. Never even heard of it. And unfortunately, mine, I'd like to say, because it's easier to look for healing when you give things a name, when you start to look at things for what they are. And a lot of mine did come from the troubled teen industry, for sure. But it started even with my parents. I was born into a toxic household, if you listen to the first episodes. But the troubled teen industry was different because it was abuse at the hands of people outside of my family.
Well, people that are professionals.
Absolutely, at the discretion of my family. So these are people that were sought out by people that had already hurt me. And here I was being told, I like to better say indoctrinated, that they're here to help me with my brokenness, my problems, which makes you believe that you deserve to be there. So while you have these people, quote unquote, helping you, you're internalizing everything like, this is my fault. I really am a bad kid, and what did I do?
Right.
To get to this point.
Yeah.
And even after I talked about my escape from the last program, and even after the escape, it was a physical escape, but it wasn't a mental escape.
Right.
Like, I very much carried it with me still, and I buried it. There was such a strong sense of shame because of the label. I was a bad kid.
Yep.
You know, so who wants to call themselves a bad kid when you're trying to get into college and become a successful adult? You know, there's so much stigma behind it. And, you know, I was being... I very much like a cult that this industry is. Very similar, even down to the business side of it. They're all tied a lot to religious cults. Lots of LDS ties in there.
I wish I could say that surprised me too. But even when you say that, right? I mean, but when you say that, there's something in there that goes, yeah, no shit, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
even,
And it's I don't know if it's just control or they weren't getting enough money in their donation plates and they needed another, you know, source of revenue. But however the connection started, it is very unfortunate because you're pulling future members out of society and you're breaking them. You're putting them into another system that's going to keep them broken. And I am thankful I became a young mom. She pushed me into a different sense of hypervigilance. It wasn't just, you know, worrying about my past. It was taking care of what was my now future, which was both a curse and a blessing because I was doing everything I could. I was, you know, working as much as I can, trying to get as much money to make sure we've got the roof and everything under it. But I kept everything buried. You know, I never acknowledged what had happened to me. And
well, who would you tell, right? Because I think, you know, in thinking about that, you know, I think about that. It's just, we learn, I guess what I'm trying to spit out is there's a part of me that like we learn, right? Tell somebody, talk to somebody. But then often the experience when you do that is they're like, did I really? You know,
absolutely.
Really?
And
you know,
the experience that I had as a younger person was so outlandish. Like most people, this is shit you see in movies, literally. And, you know, I did experience extreme levels of disassociation when I was going through it. Like my body almost pulled my soul out and I was like viewing it as an outside looking in type of perspective.
Absolutely.
Which saved me then, but it really harmed me now in the healing process because it's hard to feel 15-year-old Ashley's feelings, 16-year-old Ashley's feelings when she has that outside looking in perspective. And it's been so hard to try to process and grieve for what I lost because there was such a disconnect through the disassociation. So it's been so challenging as part of some of the parts of healing to really sit with it because I wasn't even sitting with it when I was there.
Yeah, you exactly, you detach from it. And I've heard that so often. Matter of fact, I used to work for a rape crisis program and I couldn't do it very long because my job was to work with youth. And so I had to sit when investigators were talking with them to make sure that the investigators didn't change their language. So that was the part that I had to play to make sure that, you know, no, you can't ask it like that or you got to ask that different, whatever, you know. But anyway, long story short, I can't tell you how many times, like, kids didn't think that anything happened to them. Matter of fact, I had one person talk about how they thought that it was, I can't remember, it was like a cartoon character, and I don't remember which cartoon character at the time, but they were actually adamant that this cartoon character was the one that was being hurt because, and then when the investigators showed pictures of the child's room, there was a poster of those characters, and so they were
associating it with that.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially like with her story too, like as she talked about, and I believe I said this the first time I was on, is like you hear her story and it's just so outlandish almost. It's like you don't even want to believe it's true, and then you get like deeper dives into it, and like especially like when she was growing up too, like a lot of times kids are seen, not heard, and like for her to come out and say a story like that and people be like, yeah, it couldn't have been that bad. But like the further and further we've dove into this and the more stuff we've researched, it's like it just validates everything she said. I mean, I believed her from the beginning, but I mean, some of the stuff,
good for you.
And some of the stuff is just like insane to think about. Like I can't even wrap my head around some of it. But like as a kid coming up, like trying to come out and say that to people are kind of going to like stereotype you like you're crazy or you're nuts and, you know, you're a crying wolf and you want attention. And she wasn't asking for that at all. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, it makes sense. And good for you, because I think that's the hardest part is, you know, I know for me, I had a frame in my mind, not way back, like when I first got into doing that work at a 20-something-year-old, and got into that because I was broken and looking to heal, but didn't know how. So I ended up in this position of helping other people heal, which that's a whole nother story for another time. But the crazy thing is you've got it. But what I needed to do, and what I started thinking about, is we hear all these stories and we read all these books, and there's all these that it happened. So why wouldn't we not believe that it would happen right in our backyard or to somebody that we know? Yeah. However, most people stay quiet for the reasons that we're talking about right now. Right?
Absolutely. So, and I feel like humanity has become so desensitized that when we do hear these stories, it takes away from the validity of that person's experience. And a lot of mine, I just received my diagnosis. It's been a long time working with my therapist. He's very thorough and very thankful to have found him. And he's, you know, you want a name to give things. Like I said, it's easier to look at things. So we started with looking at the situation for what it was, which was abuse. I was tortured. I was robbed of basic human rights. And then we worked towards the diagnosis. And part of that, we talked about, you know, the kids at Ivy Ridge were able to go to where the abuse occurred, which is a very important part of CPTSD healing. It's getting your brick in the wall, so to speak. It's, you know, the people in Germany having their piece of the Berlin Wall, just to remember, because it's when you have a tangible thing to attach to a mental health disorder, it really does help you realize that these are real. It helps you pull away from the society stigma of, you know, it's all in your head, because it's really not all in your head. And with my situation being in Florida, it's across the country, so it's not, you know, I've been dealing with agoraphobia, which is afraid to be out in public. So I can't just hop on a plane and, you know, fly to Florida. And another problem is the schools, the troubled teen industry in Florida is very intertwined with the educational system, the Department of Health, and the Department of Juvenile Justice. They are all intertwined. So many of these places are still open. They like to switch hands as far as the ownership name. A lot of them are 501c, so it's easy to, you know, change the name. And unfortunately, 2 of the programs that I were in are still functioning, but they're under different names. So they look a little bit different. I put a fresh coat of paint, but there's still, you know, windowless places with barbed wire, and it's, you know, it looks like people that have committed crimes would be. And my crime was essentially born into a toxic family. And I remember the second place that I was taken into, I was escorted by a sheriff. They picked me up from my home. I was handcuffed, not told where I was going, and I entered in the same exact gate, which is very secure. Only staff members. I actually sent you a picture of the gate.
I think I remember that.
And it's a way that technology has helped me. I've gotten a lot of these pictures through Google Maps, going on Google Earth, and you're able to see over the years the different updates. So I went back as far as I could, and I can see what these places looked like when I was there. And like you said, I'm seeing that bedroom with that poster on the wall. I'm getting a small piece of my brick of the wall, if you will. And that made it very real to me to see pictures and see the color of the paint. And just seeing those things made me feel feelings again. Seeing that gate open and close behind us and know that this isn't going to be an easy way out. And somebody wants me here. And that really made me connect to the feelings. And I've tried to find... you know, Ivy Ridge is a unique situation because it was more of a school setting. They built that whole program with the idea of it's like an alternative school. Well, like I said, in Florida, they're so intertwined with the juvenile justice. There is no schooling.
Excuse me.
You're essentially a prisoner because your parents want you to be.
Right.
And that's a whole other level of shame in my eyes, because that's definitely something that you don't want to talk about. I mean, I'm sure if I really wanted to obtain some sort of records, I look bad on paper somewhere. And it really, like you said, you joined, working with, crisis centers because you were broken.
Yep.
And I didn't realize what I was doing. I went back to school. My first degree was in business. And when I moved back to Sandy Creek, I decided I'm going to go to school for early childhood education. And
Yep.
a lot of your primary work, as far as your associate's degree, is early childhood development, childhood psychology.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there learning about this, and I'm like, holy shit, this really did affect me,
Right.
way more than what I thought.
Sorry.
And I was about to graduate at the same time when that documentary came out. So not only am I getting hit with the back end on a scientific and mental perspective of actually the breakdown of what was happening,
Right.
I'm hit with this massive survival testimonial of, we survived all this shit. Now what do we do with it? And we're here to be heard. And I actually shared something today, and all month I'm raising money. It's called the Unsilenced Organization. And
Yeah.
it's put together by survivors from all over the United States, from all of these programs. There's tens of thousands of programs that have been existing, that are still open today. Like I said, sometimes they change names. So if it looks like it's quote unquote closed, it's
Right.
just reopened
It's
under
just
something
yeah.
else. And it being Child Abuse Prevention Month, I've been raising money through my small business to try to donate to them.
That's incredible.
And what they do is they provide resources for, not even kids, adults, to try to find their autonomy, to find
Yep.
their way back to being a person, so they can become a member of society and not just, get put into substance abuse programs or find
Yep.
themselves in the criminal justice system, which unfortunately so many of us
Yeah.
do.
No, it's true. Those are two areas that I think mental health is the biggest part. Obviously, I think substance abuse, people would not be surprised at, that with substance abuse, there's usually also an underlying untreated mental health diagnosis. And also, I think with the criminal justice system, although I think people are more aware now that most criminals aren't just quote unquote bad people. There's an undiagnosed mental health condition that's going on for people. Again, that's not everybody, but most. One question I do have, just kind of doubling back to the whole troubled teen industry. How many of these facilities, of 100% of the facilities, right? Obviously, we have an idea that there's obviously bad apples in there. Are there any that are good? And is there a percentage where there is some good? Just out of curiosity.
It's honestly scary the more that I've gone down the rabbit hole of
Yeah.
working with people, because I'm working with some folks from the Unsilenced Organization behind the scenes, other survivors. I've actually surprisingly found a great community on Reddit, because you're a little bit more anonymous. You
Yep.
can find a community without having your name on there, and you're able to call out these companies, organizations, insurance companies by name, and kind of be around, behind a screen a little
Yep.
bit. And it's very hard to find a place that is quote unquote good.
Yeah.
I would say you're better off in the northern part of the United States, because the South is, like I said, it's very ingrained within the juvenile justice system. And the more research I've done, it almost seems like these are the first stop in what I refer to as a human trafficking pipeline into justice systems, into drug rehabilitation systems. And I'm even finding instances where these people, because they are 501c, they are privately owned companies, are selling the patient's information to drug rehabilitation centers in adult settings.
Right.
They're selling them to insurance companies to see, who the highest bidder might be and who can make the most off of these people.
Wow.
So it really is a pipeline, and the pipeline unfortunately begins in a lot of school settings, which is where the seed was planted for me to get more involved in education, because these people are more than just teaching, academic curriculum. It's one of the first classes I took is you are responsible for creating a safe space, which is your classroom. And your obligation is to, make sure, yes, Johnny and Abby learn the basics of math and their colors so they can move on to the next grade. But they're not going to be learning and retaining those knowledges if they're not eating at home, if they're being abused at home.
That's such a good point.
Their basic needs are not met. So the safety of your classroom really goes beyond the walls of the physical classroom. Like, you really need to pay attention to these kids. And I didn't have teachers that really paid attention until I was in high school.
I wonder, too, how many teachers know that these programs are shitty programs. I don't know how else to put it. I wonder how many teachers really understand, because I can imagine. So from where I'm going to take it out of when I worked in the healthcare system for a minute, I remember the drug companies would send drug reps in to come and talk to the doctors, and they would bring this spread of food. Like, it was incredible. Like, we looked forward, right? Working in the health center, it was like, drug reps are here today? Oh, we're eating good
Free
today.
lunch.
Yeah, and they did, right? But I wonder why wouldn't these TTIs do the same thing, right?
Oh, they
Let's
do.
go into schools. We're going to provide these teachers with a nice luncheon.
Absolutely.
And we're going to sell, pass out our brochures, and we're going to talk about, little Susie's story about how she was a success, and we're going to show, and the thing is, then the teachers are like buying into this.
Absolutely.
Like, so I wonder how many of the teachers aren't even aware that, like, there is things going on behind.
Yeah, well, they
I just
do
wonder,
know.
I guess all these questions come to mind.
Because in my personal experience, Florida, the schools actually have authority. They can take away the power of the parents and send kids away.
Isn't that crazy?
You can be sent away for truancy, which is, missing too much school. You'd sent away for being a runaway. And it's like, kids don't, from my experience, run away from a good, loving, nurturing home. Something's going on. When a kid runs away and leaves what they've known forever, there's a reason why they're willing to go out into a world that they don't know shit about.
Yeah.
And you can get taken away for that. And, I was considered a truant in Florida, so I spent lots of time in the truancy officer's office, but nobody ever questioned why.
Right.
They never questioned why this, honor roll student was missing so much school. There was no questions asked. And the more that I sit here and I deep dive into this, they do, these programs do go to the schools. They do go to the, the police departments, the sheriff's departments, and they give you the spread. They give you the food. And I actually got a hold of somebody that I believe I have now the same brochure that my parents would have looked at to get the phone number and information for my first program that I was put into.
Interesting.
And it's an official government document.
Wow.
From the sheriff department in the county that I lived in. So these would have been in guidance counselors' offices or in the drawers, or these are resources that they would have, used. And it's sad that there's such a stigma behind mental health and counseling and therapy, because these are the first steps you should go to. The first thing, even in abusive and, drug abuse, situations, the idea is usually to keep the child at home.
Yep.
When it's the parent doing wrong. But if it's the quote-unquote child doing wrong, the idea is, well, we did what we could. Let's send it to some underpaid, underqualified staff and see what they can do. When in reality, those people are taking out their problems on these children. Yeah. And I can honestly say the only, licensed and qualified person I ever encountered was the police and the corrections officers. The second program that I was in was actually oversaw by corrections officers.
No kidding.
Other than that, these are just early 20-somethings people that are looking for a job, and I can't imagine the impact that it had on them. And I've actually I made a Glassdoor account, which is kind of like an Indeed. You can leave reviews for your past employers, and I have yet to find somebody that is in support of any of the programs I went to.
Right.
Just pages upon pages. I mean, we're talking hundreds of pages from nurses that come and visit. They don't work there full time. Nurses that come in and see what's going on. The quote unquote counselors, which I use that term very loosely, saying, I wouldn't send my worst enemy. Get these kids out of here. And I can't tell you how many times a week I get sent emails and news articles of staff and supervisors and owners of these programs getting arrested for sexual assault on these children or physical abuse, and it's left and right.
Oh yeah.
And these people know, and as educators, you're mandated reporters, but it's as easy, we say it's easy to take care of the kids, but I believe it's much easier to look away when it's not your own child. And I think a lot of these educators aren't really realizing that when they're in your care, they are your children.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I also think it's a multi-layered problem because I've worked for a not-for-profit. And I want to preface by saying that I think that in general, at least the not-for-profit that I worked for, I think that they legitimately thought that they were doing a good job. I think administration and whatnot really had their hearts in the right place is what I'm trying to say. But when I really started thinking about it, so it was for a home for disabled adults. And so, but I started thinking about it as you were talking about staff. Now, I was a house manager, so I was considered administrative. So I had a different role than the actual staff within the house. But I was responsible for interviewing and hiring and firing and doing all that stuff and training and all that stuff of the staff. And now that I really think back about that, it's like they were all 20-something, year old kids who, really hadn't experienced. This was like a lot of times their first real full-time or even part-time job outside of maybe working at a pizza shop or a grocery store like we all did in, maybe in high school, right? And I started thinking about that and why is that? And it all comes down also to pay scale. So here you're paying people really low wages who are responsible for taking care of another person. Yeah,
absolutely.
So, of course, there are these low-paying jobs, which only people who are, and they're considered entry-level. Yeah. And so you can pile all of this.
They're almost targeting people, too. You know what I mean? Like, you're targeting a younger demographic almost.
Sure.
With it being low-paying, and it's like you said, some of the people are reaching out to you and saying, I would never send people there or work there or anything like that. And it's kind of like, what picture did you get painted to even come here in the first place? And it's like, I wonder if the picture is almost similar to some of the unknowing parents that send these kids here, or, even the school counselors and stuff. Like, what picture are they painting to these people that makes them think like, oh, you know what? It might not be that bad. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just crazy to think about. And then come to find out, it's absolutely nothing like that at all. Yeah. And like you said, like in administration and stuff like that, it's like, how high up does it actually go? And some people probably don't end up figuring stuff out until people are leaving or getting fired, and then all of a sudden you're diving into it, and well, that person was just, they were not good. That's the reason why they're leaving. It's like a big hidden secret the whole time.
Yeah, because I think that happened on a small scale. Now where I worked, again, it was, for disabled adults, so completely different type of scenario, but same as in the sense of when you really start peeling back the layers, it's like, if I look at the 100% of the staff in my house, and 80% of them are under the age of 25. Yeah. And this is their first job, and yet they're tasked with bringing these guys to doctor's appointments, mental health appointments. A lot of these gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen were on psych meds, right? Yeah. And I'm entrusting like this
with their lives.
And I'm not talking, and I want to be careful because there are definitely 20-somethings who can handle and are, you know, this has nothing to do with experience or intelligence or anything like that. It has to do with experience.
Absolutely.
It has to do with experience and experience only, right? But because the wages are so low, but here we are, we're tasking, you know, again, these young people with these great responsibilities. But I also wonder if it's because how impressionable they are.
Yeah.
We can teach them our way of doing it, right?
Yeah.
The TTI way of doing it, because they don't know any different. They have no work history.
And you kind of have an influence over them too, because, you know,
Absolutely.
like when I had my first job, like it's money coming in, you get your first job, you're like, this is awesome. Like first, I guess you say first big boy job.
Right.
And you're like, you have this money and it's like the pressure not to get fired, or like you don't want to say something that might get you in trouble and stuff like that. And it's like, they have such an impression, I think that's, an impression over you of like, oh, you know what, my boss who's been doing this forever said this is what we do, this is the way we're doing it, and, you know, I'm not going to go against it. You know, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get fired. I like the money. You know, It might not be very much, but it's still something coming in my pocket, and I can go do stuff with it.
Right.
Yeah, and it's you literally lose your autonomy almost when you become part of these systems because of that influence. It's like you leave who you are out in the parking lot and you do what they say for minimal pay. So you're not only are you dealing with the stress of the job, but you're dealing with the stress that you're getting paid so little, you're working so hard, and it impacts your own personal lives. It has to.
So it seems to me, and I'm not taking away from your experience of having to live through this, but then it's like there's this multi-layer of abuse that's happening, because you're hiring staff that's impressionable, like you just pointed out, and then, you know, you're teaching them these ways, so you're basically making them abusers in a sense, you know, because
and making them feel like it's okay to do, you know what I mean? Because kids that age are somewhat, you can influence them certain ways. You know what I mean?
Right. It's basic us and them mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
You're either on that team or this team, right? And so it's very, very much programmed thinking.
Yeah. And
it's brainwashing.
And that team looks,
100%.
you know, they get better stuff. They get more stuff. And this team kind of sucks. So you know what? I'm just going to kind of keep my head down.
Exactly.
That team I get way more benefits out of.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine. Yeah. So anyway, not to all this stuff, just as you're telling the story, talking about making your head spin, I guess, and not to, no pun intended, but
it connects dots that you wouldn't think.
Your mind starts going and going. You start thinking and thinking. Then like you get down the rabbit holes of like looking into stuff and like figuring out more. And it becomes almost in a good and bad way addicting, and like trying to figure out, and then all of a sudden you get an answer to this, and then that's going to bring up more questions in your head. And it just keeps, it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. It just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And like,
I can imagine
some of the stuff like that we've seen and she showed me and saw, and like the inner web and the intertwining and what goes where and the money from who and what, it's just absolutely insane to think of some of the places that would fund these, or people that would fund these, or things that these places are tied into that you would never in a million years even picture that they would be. And it's just absolutely insane. It's
the power of money.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just
crazy. It has the
crazy.
power to dehumanize people, and it goes back to the us versus them. And so like I said, I graduated with my associates in early childhood development, but that's when really I had to face it. It was like my balloon had taken too much air and it finally popped. And so what I thought was just, you know, side effects of being a young 20-something and being a young mom were actually showing up as side effects of CPTSD. So when I started working towards getting a diagnosis, my health plummeted, you know, physical symptoms left and right, panic attacks every day, just living in this extreme sense of just hypervigilance that it was so hard to get away from. So I couldn't go right back to school. And I'm almost thankful for the moment in time because, like I said, it gave it names to what I needed to face. And it made me pivot. You know, I knew I wanted to help kids, but I realized, you know, all of these systems that had broken me, I was now trying to be a part of by, wanting to go be a teacher, be in a classroom 9 to 5. And this system is way too much for me to break as one person. And being a mom, my daughter, 15 years old, she's the same age I was when I was literally kidnapped from my own bed and taken away. So at the same time as I'm learning about the psychological impacts on an academic level, I'm facing my own experiences head on, and then I'm a parent of a child who was the same exact age, who looks just like me. And here I'm, bitching at her for staying up too late. And then it immediately made me realize, let her be a kid. Mm-hmm. All this pressure that I had put on her over the years, it was like a release of that when I realized that your job is to do 2 things to these children, to love them and support them. Beyond that, they are looking for their own autonomy. Mm-hmm. They are their own people. And I see so many parents doing whatever they can to try to control the narrative of another person's autonomy.
Yep.
And it's one thing to give these kids the tools that, we pick up along the way. And it's like, I look at it as like, a grandpa passing along his tool, the collection he's got in his garage. These are the ones that worked good. These are the ones that worked bad. And when I started seeing it as that type of perspective, I honestly believe that I became a better parent. And I don't just believe that, I know I did, because, teens don't talk a lot. They, especially now, they hide in their room, they've got their TVs, their technology, they're good, unless, the ramen supply is dwindling, we don't need you. And a very powerful moment for me was when my daughter told me that no matter where we've been, no matter what home we've been in, I've always made her feel safe. I've been that home.
Yeah.
And that hit me like a brick wall. That was, that was me coming to terms with, I am doing the right thing and breaking these cycles of generational trauma. And it really pushed me to be more selfish. And I know that sounds weird because I'm talking about, parenting and how I want to be a better parent. But if you don't take care of yourself and really dig deep and become the best you can be to claim your autonomy back, how can you possibly collect these tools and give them to the next generation? And, I would say for the first month of my therapy, I kept saying, I'm here for my daughter, I'm here for my family. And then I remember one day getting on, I apologized to him. And, I said, I know I kept saying I was here for my daughter and my family, but I'm here for myself. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I've known that, but it's up to you to realize that is part of the healing. And it's the first time in my life I've been able to be selfish. Yep. Up until I met my husband, it was a single mom, workaholic, trying to outrun my past as fast as I could. Oh, sure. And it became easier to bury everything down because life was getting packed on top of that. And then once I had stability, I had that loving home, I slowed down and I was like, holy shit, you got some problems that you need to deal with. Yeah. Big time.
Yeah, they always sneak back. And
it's been hard. I mean, up until him, my relationships, very much my personal relationships, mirrored my parents. They mirrored what I was used to. They were toxic, but it was, to me, better to have somebody than nobody. Mm-hmm. And it's even kind of like the indoctrination that I got in these programs. It was, we're here to help you. It doesn't matter how bad we're treating you. At least you have somebody here to help you type of mindset. And to be in a loving and supporting environment that you can flourish in really slows everything down and makes you realize the shit that you went in before. Mm-hmm. So I had no choice but to face everything. So not only did I have the physical symptoms, but my brain was tapping me on the shoulder like, lady, we have a mess up here and we need to organize these filing cabinets, because it's affecting everything around you. And everybody that I'd considered as friends quickly disappeared. I wasn't the person that could, give my time. I was a person that needed an ear to listen. I needed a shoulder to lean on. And when you don't have as much to give people, what they think is giving, they disappear. And what I have to give now is genuineness.
Yep.
I have my autonomy. I have so many beneficial tools. So it's like I'm better equipped to be a friend now than I ever was before.
I think, too, one of the things that happens, to jump on that, too, is with relationships, if we've got lots of people around us, then we don't have time to really think about ourselves either, right?
It's too much chatter.
Because, there's all this, and let me help this person over here, and let me help this person over there. And it doesn't even have to be anything serious. Like, I'm going to pick their dog up from the vet and drop it off home for them on my way home from work. It's simple.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know if people really do that. I just, But my point being is that it doesn't all need to be like this deep-seated, like, I'm involved in, like, oh, you're having problems in your relationship, let me be in here. It doesn't have to be that. It's just the fact that we've got people around. But you're right.
Yeah.
Those people start kind of stepping back for their own reasons or for whatever. It doesn't matter. And then we got to start dealing with this chatter that's in our head that we've been trying to drown out with other noise, right?
Right.
I mean, it makes sense.
You start seeing the people that, you've always showed up for, and when you step back to see if they'll show up to you, their true colors come out.
Yeah, that's true too.
And you know what I mean? And they don't, people that you care about, that you thought you cared about, that had your back and stuff like that, like, they don't. It was convenient for them at the time. Like, they could call you, let's go, let's ride, let's do this. And then all of a sudden, when it's, their turn to show up, they got something that comes up, or they're too busy.
And that's a lonely feeling too.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it definitely, it's a kind of a shitty thing. But it makes you find your true people that deserve to be in your life, deserve your time, and just deserve, like, every aspect of you, I guess. You know what I mean?
It's funny I think you're right. And when you start to find your center and yourself, which I know for, and you can speak to this too, I'm sure. I know for me, when I really started doing that, I struggled because one of the things that was constantly drilled on me as a kid is you're being selfish. So selfish was this word that was, used as
it was negative.
It was negative. It was used as a punishing, and it was emotional abuse. It really is, and you think about that now, and as an adult person, I struggled so long to really do anything self-care because that was selfish.
Absolutely.
Right? It took so long to undo that message and to realize that, like, hey, finding my center and I don't know that I've gotten to the point where I can say I love myself yet, but getting to the point where I can say I like the person that I am. I'm not really a bad dude. That took a long time because for the longest time to talk like that felt like you're being selfish, right? And so that's the other part too. And so I think in that journey, you find real quick who's going to hang with you and who's not, because you start doing the self work and people are like, yeah, fuck, I'm out because you're not giving of your time anymore. You're not, you know what I mean?
And it's definitely not easy too, because you want to please, like me, I'm a big pleaser, and I like to please people. And, you kind of realize that the pleasing is affecting you more, and some people could really give a shit about your feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it takes something for you to realize that, or, you give it your all and then you expect it back and you don't get it. And it's like, well, what's wrong with me? You know what I mean?
It
you
brings
start
it
getting
right back to that.
Yeah. It's like an isolating feeling. And it's once you start to realize that you can please yourself, it makes the isolation, which also has a negative connotation, it makes it more of you spending time and digging deep inside of yourself, which until you start healing can be a very uncomfortable feeling.
Oh, yes.
But to heal, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
You do.
And I think that bothers a lot of people too, is because when you realize that somebody's so comfortable with themselves and they haven't put into the work or they haven't taken the time, it's almost like people are jealous. Like, how the hell can you do that? You know what I mean? And they want to step away from you, and they get mad because you're not doing this and this and this. But
they're getting called out in a way.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you're good. I'm perfect. I care about myself. I don't need to be around doing all this stuff. And people almost get like, it's like angered by it almost.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they are afraid to put in the work and see what it's like. And
Yeah. I think also people are, when you really start to do some healing, I think that for some reason, I haven't been able to figure this out, but it becomes offensive to other people. And you're changing, and it's like, and you're different, and it like becomes a negative, but it's like, none of that is negative.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing the work to become a better person, as long as that's what you're doing, right? I mean, I guess
Exactly.
it depends on how the argument goes. In this case,
yeah.
you know, you're making these strides to be a better person, and you're doing this work to heal yourself and to really be able to sit with yourself, right? Because that's the toughest thing, when you got to sit there with yourself and realize, like, well, I haven't been, you know, the healthiest or the best or whatever, you know. And I think you're right, you know. And people, for some reason, get so offended by that. At least that's the experience that I've had, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of Western culture. It's like the idea of autonomy is offensive because there's so much power behind it.
Yeah.
When you find your true self, you find your purpose, you find your footing, you're able to stand on a solid ground for your beliefs, your causes. And, you know, people don't like power. You know, power is only supposed to be in the hands of so many. And then when you have everybody finding their autonomy, that becomes a dangerous and threatening thing to many people.
Sure.
And I really think it's a part of Western culture, unfortunately. We're supposed to just be a herd of sheep. So when you purposely do work to become the black sheep, it's like, wait a minute, like that's supposed to be a bad thing, and you don't go against the flow. That's not what we do.
It's like the shirt you have, down with my demons, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're getting down with your demons, and it's an uncomfortable thing to do, but it's very relieving thing to do when, like she said, you're at the table with them and you're hanging out with them, and, you know, you're having a chat, and it's actually becomes peaceful after a while when you realize that
they're not demons.
Yeah,
like
they're
even,
just another aspect.
Even calling these so-called not so pleasant feelings, you know, fear, grief, anger, it makes me think of the movie Inside Out. I reference it all the time in therapy. You know, all of these emotions and feelings have a job, and they make you who you are. And when you don't let anger do their job or grief do their job, well, joy doesn't know how to do that.
Yep.
So that's not getting done. And we have, again, a failing system, and that system is yourself.
Yep.
So when people say, you know, I'm dealing with my demons, it's a negative connotation that's been given to these not so pleasant and desired feelings, which are all just as valid as the other ones.
You're so right. And that is such a great, I'm going to have to go back. Gia watches that movie a lot. I'm going to have to go and actually sit and watch it with her. But I think, and this is one of the things that I think I've struggled with, so I'm going to kind of point the question over to you for a minute, Alex. But, you know, I think about from a perspective of being a man in society, and of course we don't show our emotions, but what comes out safely for men is anger, right? How many times, like, I don't know how you grew up, but for me it's like that was definitely the one thing that you saw, like, you know, I can think about even in just language, right? Like, oh, you wait till your father gets home because he's going to be pissed, right? Not because he's going to be disappointed, not because he's going to be sad that you did that. It's because he's going to be pissed, right? Or, you know, so that's the one safe emotion for us. But if you really look under that, it's not really anger. It's fear. It's embarrassment. It's what, you know, there's another emotion but that's the safe one to show is the anger. So I think you're so right. We don't know how to really, we've got to allow these other feelings to be felt, but we don't really know how to do that either because we don't spend a lot of time talking about that.
And I think some of the anger comes from, like, you're always, like, especially as a male, and we had talked about this before, is like you're told you can't be something or you can't be sad. You can't talk about your problems, and that's where the anger comes from. It's like you want to talk about it, you want to get it out there, but you know that in society, it's so frowned upon for men to speak about their feelings, for men to do anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's where you get a lot of the anger from, like, especially in males, like, in a younger age. Like, I was an angry young kid.
So was I.
Like, so angry. Go off the wall, yell, scream, kick holes in the wall, punch holes in the wall. And it's like, looking back, it's like, you didn't have to do that.
Yeah, where did that all come from?
But it's just like I grew up in a great household, and but I was just such an angry child for no reason really but it's just because you didn't know how to deal with your emotions because you're always told,
societal norm.
suck it up. You got to suck it up.
And it's one of those things that I think still happens. For example, and this is how I know, because whether it's life imitating art or art imitating life, right? I just finished watching the last few episodes of Yellowstone, okay? And there is a scene in there. Have you watched it? Do you?
Not yet.
Okay. So, spoiler alert. But there is a scene in there. Obviously, everybody knows John Dutton is the head of the Yellowstone Ranch, and in the end of the season, he dies, okay? So I hope that's not. I think people know that by
You
now.
just ruined everybody.
Yeah, there's so many people who haven't
Oh my
watched it yet
God.
who just went, Sean? Anyway, but there's this. So there are, and it deals with cowboys. All right, so they're all these tough ass cowboys that work these ranches. Doing all the stereotypes of what we think cowboys. That's what's in the show. So anyway, this one guy who's known to be kind of like this rough dude, has to tell one of his cowboys, one of his, I don't know what they call him, but his lower ranking cowboys, that John Dutton passed, and he was like a father figure to this guy. And so, anyway, the reason I'm getting long-winded about this is it sets the whole scene. It's just there. He goes, hey, Jimmy, let's take a walk, right? And you see these guys walking off, and they get to the spot, and he tells them, hey, I got to tell you, John Dutton died, blah, blah, blah. And of course, Jimmy doesn't know what to do, and he's sitting there with his, his boss, the leader of the whole thing, right? And he's trying not to show emotion, and it just the whole scene kind of shows you, in my opinion, how men are with each other. And of course he gets teary-eyed, and the guy slaps him on the back. He goes, I hate when that dust gets in my eyes too, Jimmy. Why don't you go take a ride?
Yeah, and it shows you're vulnerable.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, but it also shows that we still don't know how to address this stuff, right, amongst men. We don't know. Like, can you imagine having, I worked construction, I worked in the oil field. I couldn't imagine telling my foreman, or my foreman having to explain to me that somebody passed away and what kind of emotion, because in that field, like, it was dangerous to show emotion.
Yep.
In the oil field, that was weakness. You couldn't show that amongst your brethren. You were then the weak link, and you didn't want to be the weak link. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's
because it's one of those
stuff.
things. Like if something bad goes down, you want somebody that isn't, like you said, the weak link, isn't gonna be emotional, not be somebody is gonna be ready to fix or go and help. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I just think about all this stuff as you're coming up, and that's such a great example using the Inside Out movie. I never really thought about that, but
and the other side of it is, when women were looked at as overreactive, and
good
unfortunately,
point. That's a great point.
it leads to a lot of misdiagnosis.
Yep.
When it comes to mental health, because we're too upset, or we're too this, we might be depressed, and are we really processing emotions from something else? And the more deep I go into my own personal experience, I can't tell you how long it's taken some of these people to get diagnosed with CPTSD, with PTSD, and not, depression or generalized anxiety disorders. Like, many of these things they're being supposedly diagnosed with are really symptoms of a root cause, but because they're women, they're just overreactive. Oh, they must be on their period, and they're emotional. It's so sad that we place these norms just on gender, and we're not looking at the people as just a person and finding the root cause of it. And that was my main thing of healing, is to get as deep as I can. So I paused, my collegiate career. I started my own business. Mainly focuses on, vintage clothing, vintage textiles. I do a lot of mending and alterations. And it gave me a tangible way to fix things. I'm seeing things going from broken and thrown away and useless to now being fixed and putting life back into thing, which is, it's a very metaphorical,
I was just going to say,
representation of my own journey. And it's also allowed me to maintain, financial autonomy, I guess you will, because I haven't been able to work outside of the home in years because of the physical symptoms that this has had. And, being in the vintage sector and doing this type of thing, I work with a lot of people in history. And that was also my concentration as a future educator. So I've now decided to pivot My next degree is going to be in history, which will be my bachelor's.
Yeah.
And then my master's, I'm going to do political and social sciences.
Very nice.
So that way, I thought the classroom was where I wanted to be, but I'm now finding that if I use my personal experience about education, about the history, and then get behind, political sciences, I can use all those to help not just the people that have been in these programs before, but hopefully get to some more reform going.
Yeah.
To get these places regulated, to make sure that we're not just hiring, unqualified people to help, we're not fixing these kids. We're treating and diagnosing, getting to the root of some serious things that might be going on.
Right.
Some of these kids might have autism. Some of them might have, ADD, OCD. And so what these parents see as acting out, they may have a serious, mental health condition that's just undiagnosed.
Yeah.
And to them, they're slapping on the label of they're a bad kid and we can't handle them anymore. And
I also think it's partly too that parents then feel responsible for the diagnosis too. Do you think,
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, if my child's autistic, that must be my fault somehow. Or if my child is OCD or ADHD, that must be my fault somehow. And that's not necessarily the case. I think, part of the problem is we haven't, until recent, we haven't really dug into mental health. So we don't know if it, there's so much that they even know happens genetically, and then there's things that can happen in utero.
Factors. Yeah,
and right,
absolutely.
and it's not just necessarily because you were in a unhealthy relationship yourself. It can be just nutrition even.
Yeah.
They're finding, and we know that our foods are stock full of chemicals and stuff right now. So my point being is there's so many other factors. And I think, though, again, it comes all back to that message that there's still, I know for me, at least keeping it on the eye, that if someone were to say to me, oh, your child has blah, 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 there's a ping of like, did I cause that? Like, even if I can work through that, there's still that, man, what did I do? To,
And I think that's another side effect of Western culture. These children come into the world without autonomy. When I was growing up, it was very, you're seen and not heard. And they are people as soon as they are conceived, as soon as they come out. They are a person. It doesn't matter if you've gone around, that son 12 times, 30 times, 40 times, no matter what, you are an individual. And when I really started looking at not just my child, but other children as an individual, and you strip away that age and you speak to them, they have a voice. They may not have, the same vocabulary, but they can talk about the same things. They're dealing with the same things. And when you give them their autonomy and let them figure that out, it's a little bit, I guess, easier to take some of the guilt and shame away of things that are going to happen to them, because they are their own people. As much as I want to prepare her for the world not to hurt her, the world is an ugly place, and it's going to. But as long as I continue to collect those good tools that I know work, so I can pass along a collection, absolutely, that's going to help her along her route of being her own person. And I think we have this idea of we need to control these kids, but I hope that people listening to my story realize no matter how much you pay, no matter how much you torture, no matter how much you rip away their human rights, there's an innate hunger for your own autonomy.
Well, sure. And I think I want to go back. You were talking about, going to school for early childhood development. And I'm sure you learned this as well. I remember having to take a psych course in childhood development. And one of the things that they teach you is, they teach you two things. They teach you the hierarchy of needs, right? Which I'm thinking of that pyramid where it's
Maslow.
Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? So you've got to have, a roof over your head, and then food, and you've got to have these basic needs that you talk about, right? But I also think about just childhood development, whether it's Erikson, whether it's Piaget, whether you even want to go back and talk about Freud, right? All of the thing, what was the end goal was autonomy.
Absolutely.
And you had to do this step to get to this step, to get to this step, right? And like, there's, even though the schools of thought might be different, Piaget, even Erickson, right? Erik Erikson.
Yep.
Their model was you got to get to autonomy, but you have to go through these steps of development in order to get there. And so that's exactly like I like all of that is coming, and I haven't done that shit in 30 years, but you know, it's all coming back to me. Like you're right. Like if we want, like I'm thinking Erickson, trust versus mistrust. What are we teaching? It's a simple like what you're talking about tools. Am I teaching mistrust or am I teaching trust? What does that look like? You know, trust is very different in the sense of that's not control. How do we show somebody we trust? You know, you can't force somebody to trust you. You can't control somebody to trust you. That's actually mistrust.
Yeah.
You know?
And in a sense, like my experience has robbed me of so many of levels on the the hierarchical needs. And it's affected me as a parent. It's affected me as a spouse. It affects me as a business owner. I mean, no matter how hard I work, sometimes it's never enough. You know, am I showing up in the way that I feel I need to? And it's not, I'm not crediting myself for just showing up, which should be credited for.
Yep.
I'm always looking at it as, am I enough for them?
Yep.
Am I putting in enough work? And you have to learn to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
All throughout life. Like
you do.
Not just in hard times, but in good times. Like I've been probably preaching sermons to my daughter about, give yourself grace, because you have to show up for yourself, and it's not going to look the same for everybody.
That's right.
Your best is not their expectations, and you're not here to fulfill other people's expectations. And if they show up and they enjoy them, then those are your people.
Yeah.
If
absolutely.
not, then they can carry on in their journey.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Thanks for stopping by.
See you down the dusty trail.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's
just keep with the Yellowstone theme.
Yeah. And it's the healing. Like I said, it's rough. It's almost like, because it's scar tissue, it never really heals.
Yeah,
There's always
you're right.
There's always pains that are there. So you kind of learn to. It's more coping than healing in my eyes, because
that's a good
when you have a diagnosis, especially like PTSD or CPTSD, it's like the elephant in the room that follows you around, that's always waving its trunk trying to get you, to give you its attention, and you have to do everything you can, to stay the course, do your thing, but that elephant is going to be with you the rest of your life.
No, you're exactly right.
And you can't always ignore it. The elephant's going to get hungry. You know, the elephant's going to need attention, and you have to become able to not look at it as a bad thing.
Right.
And it's really hard to do when people see these types of mental disorders, many mental disorders, as you're broken.
Yep.
You're no longer a productive part of society. Like, you have nothing to give. And we do. I mean, we're fighting a battle every single day and still showing up.
No.
So we have a lot to give.
It's funny. What came to my mind, I'm such a visual person. What came to my mind as you were talking about that, because, again, I just need the visual, and an amputee.
Yeah.
Right? We physically can see an amputee must have had a struggle, an accident, something, right?
Yeah.
But we don't see that on the mental health side. And so, people who are amputees or, quadriplegics, paraplegics, or whatever, right? A physical ailment.
They can look at that missing piece.
But also, we know that they can adapt.
Absolutely.
We know that these people can be whole, right? It just might look different for them in that. Maybe they have something that's an assistant, like a wheelchair or a seeing eye dog or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We can't see that on the mental health side, but it's very much the same.
Oh, absolutely.
The healing might look different, because obviously you're not going to grow an arm or a limb back, right? But you become adaptive. And I think that's the importance with diagnoses with mental health too, is it gives you a starting ground to be able to start chipping away and working at something. And so you might not be whole in the perspective of like, I'm a perfect healed human being now with all my 10 fingers and 10 toes, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't adapt and we can't
or find
learn.
our prosthesis that we can lean on.
Fucking A.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, really.
Absolutely. Like we actually had that same conversation last night. Like, not that I would want to lose a limb, but it's like I have lost parts of myself.
Exactly.
And not being able to see them, I think, has been a little bit harder for my healing.
Yep.
But now that I'm trying to dig in and think about, Maslow, the needs that that weren't met, and thinking about them and spending time with myself in those areas is helping me to see the amputation. And it's helping me to find the coping skills and the mechanisms that I need to help, the crutches that I'm going to need, because sometimes it's going to be harder to walk than others, because there's definitely been an amputation of some part somewhere.
Yeah,
I just can't see it, and it's, there are resources out there, and unfortunately most of them are from survivors of this program that have gotten together, that are working to create these programs and help people, not just the kids that are newly out, but adults, providing them with occupational therapy. You can even, this company that I'm working with, on Silence Organization, we'll even mail you a laptop, basic care kits.
That's absolutely incredible.
Free therapy, which, like I said, it's hard to find people from your specific program because there's so damn many of them. But they offer therapy in, online group settings, so I can connect with kids from Utah and California and Georgia, because even though we were in different places, we're all very much a part of a very sinister program that it has similarities in every facility. So they have been incredible, free monthly therapy. And a lot of these people do come out, trying to figure out their autonomy and where they fit. A lot of people can't afford therapy. Even with my insurance, I still have to pay.
Well, and even right now, I mean, there's so much up in the air right now, programs being cut and whatnot. And I don't want to get political, but it's just the reality of what we all are living in right now.
Absolutely.
So that's crazy. I want to rewind back one thing, though. You talked about that you're a business owner, and you talked about how, and we did briefly touch on a little bit how some of past traumas and whatnot have also impacted your career and work life and all of that. Because this is one of the things I think that is such a struggle. And I'm going to use that, not to overuse that analogy, but I'm going to use the analogy of a physical disability again. So again, if you're blind, if you're deaf, if you're missing a limb, whatever, obviously, again, that's something that we can see as a problem. And obviously, I feel like there's a little bit more, I don't know what the word would be. I don't want to say forgiveness, but there's a little bit more of understanding of why somebody might not be able to perform a physical job or this or that. But again, mental health, we don't because we can't see it, and we can't, maybe correlate it the same way. But that also impacts our 100%. Career, because that's one of the things I feel like that I can speak to, that I've dealt with in my work life, is how mental health impacts that. I know for me, because it came up a little bit, and we didn't touch on this. We can do it, obviously we'll do it right now. But imposter syndrome very much is a trauma response.
100%.
In imposter syndrome, even though it's not a DSM-4 or 5 diagnosis, it is still, I like to think of it as a symptom of, right? So absolutely. It's a symptom of. And where I have experienced that the most in my life is definitely in my career path. I constantly am holding myself up. So if you or I, Alex, were on the same job, it's like, am I as good as him? Can I do it as good as him?
Yeah.
Or almost a nervousness, like my boss would come to me in the oil field. I want you to lay out this iron. I want you to put a kick here, and I want you to put a valve here, and I want you to do all this stuff. And I'm in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe he asked me to do this, because Alex could do it better than I could. Or, here's my time to shine. But all this nervousness comes in.
Yeah, it's hypervigilance.
Yeah. And so anyway, before I, but my point is that those are the things that you can't see that are racing around in somebody's head.
100%.
Those comparisons and those failures and the self-sabotage and all that stuff that comes out, and how that's a daily struggle just going to work.
Oh, yeah. And for me, I do 100% of my own marketing of, the clothes I sell, the custom pieces I make. I model them. So I'm taking pictures of myself and being comfortable enough to not just take them, but share them with the world. And that's such a battle. I mean, I literally had to use a mannequin for probably a year and a half because I didn't feel comfortable. And it wasn't that I didn't feel comfortable with taking the pictures. I didn't feel like they were enough. I didn't feel like I was what they wanted to see.
Right.
And the more I told my story, people were like, get rid of that damn mannequin. Her name's Rhonda. We call her Rhonda. She's my assistant. And, you know, even since being on the podcast, and I share my story a little bit on, you know, my page because I do a lot of history and things like that. But I try to do it in a way that it's not, you know, triggering for people that have been through abuse. But the more that, like, I've been on here and I've shared these episodes, people are like, I understand why Rhonda came into the picture.
Yep.
But you deserve to be there. You're doing the work. We want to see you, you know?
Yeah.
And that was so validating to me because it was like you said, there's a little bit more understanding of what physical, you know, ailments or, you know, incapacities people have. But when it comes to mental, you can't see them until they're put in front of you, until you're dealing with them. And by telling my story, by putting it out there, it's people can't be blind to it anymore. And it's helped me with the imposter syndrome because it's like, not only am I telling myself, you know, I deserve this, I'm putting in the work, but it's other people being like, we see you. Yep. And especially people that are outside of the industry, outside of any sort of mental health things. And that speaks volumes. And that's why I'm here. That's why I continue to talk about it and advocate it and, you know, work with these groups and provide as many resources as I can so that they can help people because this platform is powerful. Your stories are powerful. And I can only tell my story. You know, there's so many other people that aren't ready to tell their story, but hopefully me telling mine will give them, you know, the sense that they deserve to be heard too. Everybody's story should be told by themselves, not by somebody else, because the story loses its genuineness. You lose the, you know, the emotional attachment to that person's lived in experience when somebody else tells their story. And this is a way to do it, you know. Podcasting, if you're not comfortable being on film, this is a great way to do it. Reddit, like I said, can't tell enough good things about that. There's communities there. Even if you want to work behind the scenes, unsilenced.org, great resource. They can, you know,
keep
you don't have to put yourself out there. I'm not saying you need to, you know, be on Instagram taking pictures of yourself, you know, putting yourself out there. There's so many ways that you can show up for yourself.
And it's baby steps. You know, it's about building the comfortability. And I think that's the importance in that too. And I love your story. I think that it's great. I appreciate that you come and share. And I think you're right. Like, just the ability, and that's what I love about this, right? Being able to just kind of connect back to our humanness, you know, a little bit. And understand that there are things going on behind the scenes that we cannot see. You know, people are having struggles. And again, you know, it's important to have a little bit of grace.
Absolutely.
You know? I think that's so true. Right? All right. Did I get to all of your, did we do it? Did we get to everything on there?
Yeah,
pretty much.
I think
what I'm referring to is I had an outline that Ashley had put together. And I am infamous for my ADHD says, you're not going to follow this. We're not going to go to 6. We're going to jump back to 2 for a minute, you know?
Shouldn't even put numbers on it. Just jump around whatever you feel like.
I mean, I think the only thing, I mean, not that we miss, but it's you know, there's resources out there. And not just a message to my younger self, but I look at, like if you're familiar with nesting dolls, over, you know, in
those
in
are
Europe.
Russian, right?
Yes,
they're the doll.
Matryoshka dolls. They're referred to over there.
So explain. They're the doll that's inside the doll that's inside the doll, right?
And that's the way I look at human development. You know, we start from the small one, and then as we get older and bigger, more knowledge and experience, we get that, you know, new shell on the outside. But all of the other dolls are still in there,
still present.
So I have conversations throughout my healing with all ages of myself. I've talked to 20-year-old Ashley. I've talked to teenage-year-old Ashley. I've talked to, you know, adolescent Ashley. So if I really could, you know, open all my doll set and really talk to the smallest one, I would tell her, you know, it's going to be more than okay. Like, you may not have the love and support that you have now, But it doesn't have to just come from an outside source.
Right.
You can give yourself love and support. And at a young age, it can feel lonely because if you're not being given that, you don't really know what that looks like.
I agree.
But as you get older with experience, and like I said, in my stable relationship now, once you really feel love and support, it's so much easier to give it to yourself.
Yeah.
And that would be the best message that I could give younger Ashley, I guess, is that it's coming.
Yep.
And that you already know that you're not getting it because you know what's happening to you is wrong because you hurt.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to feel the hurt.
Yeah.
Feel it, sit with it, because if you don't, it's going to show up later.
Yep.
Your body remembers everything.
Oh, God.
And if you don't sit with it, if you don't cry when you need to, if you don't get mad when you need to, and more importantly, if you do not grieve when you need to, these are things that will all come up
Yep.
and beg to be felt later. And I felt I used to get in trouble and reprimanded for crying, and now it's like if I feel like I need to cry, I cry.
Yep.
I let that shit out. And that would be such an important message I would say to little Ashley is just, if you're sad, fucking cry.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Be
It's
sad.
okay to be sad.
It's okay.
It doesn't even have to be just a sad cry. It can be a happy cry,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
cry for anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, that's such a great point. You know, I
Just
think,
like when the geese are coming back and saying that it's going to be summer. You
Oh,
can
I
cry
break
for
down.
that.
Yeah.
He came home one day, and I'm in the driveway breaking down because I saw my first large flock head over, and I just broke down because it's just a beautiful sign from nature saying, new growth is coming.
Yeah.
It's a new chapter. This
It's-
is just our sign. We'll see you guys when we head
It's
south.
so weird. I got goosebumps literally right now saying that because it's so true. All these messages that have been either taught to me or told to me over my professional experiences, right? And one of the things, you've brought it up several times, sit with your feelings. You got to sit with your feelings. You got to really sit with that stuff
Yeah.
and figure it out. But the other thing is to give acknowledgement, to be in the now. How often are we in the now,
Yeah,
And
we're
we
always trying to
really-
get to the next
Yeah,
thing. Get
but
through
it's
it.
okay, right.
Instead
Yeah,
of
let's
be
just get through it.
Be in it.
I think about that even at work, right? Like it's Monday. I just got to get through the week.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm approaching 50. I don't know how many more weeks I just want to
Right.
get through anymore.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
You
Because
want
it's
to
like,
be, you
Yeah.
want to
I'm
live
on the other
Monday.
side of that bell curve now where, I
Yeah.
don't know that I got 50 years still in front of me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So anyway, on that note, I really appreciate you coming in. Listeners, if you do have questions, you can tag me on Facebook. You can also reach out to Ashley through Facebook. Also Instagram.
Yeah.
TikTok, which I really just use TikTok more for marketing stuff. I don't really know if there's any more of a use for it than that. But definitely, like I said, Facebook, definitely Instagram. I do have email, which I'm terrible about putting that out, but that's vertigopod@gmail.com. So vertigopod @gmail.com. So you can certainly reach out that way. So plenty of ways. You can also leave a comment on Apple and or YouTube or Spotify, wherever you're listening. Those comments do get back to me. So don't hesitate to ask questions. And also, if you're interested in coming on, Ashley, you were talking about being able to have a voice and being able to tell your story has been something that has been very empowering for you. And,
Yeah.
I would like to give that opportunity to other people too. If this is a forum that you're interested in and want to explore, reach out. And even if you don't want to come on Vertigo, but maybe you want to start your own podcast, I can certainly tell you on how to do that as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us
coming
again.
in. And so much appreciated. And with that, I guess Vertigo listeners, I hope this was an episode that intrigued you and hope that it made your head spin. Thank you for tuning in.